The Senior Rehab Project is supported by the Game Changers, a group of motivated rehab clinicians that are crushing mediocrity and advancing care for older adults. You can join this group of people and get access to the private Facebook group, the monthly meetup with article discussions, and have a say in the direction of this movement. Get off the sidelines and get involved. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com/Game Changers. Hit me!
This is a Senior Rehab Podcast, the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults. And now your host, my grandson, Dusty Jones.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. This is your host, Dustin Jones, and I am joined by the lovely Melissa Klaeb. That's how you say your name, right?
That is perfect.
Normally, a podcast host asks that before they start recording, but I failed to do so.
I like the freestyling. It's great.
All right. So Melissa Klaeb, she's a physical therapist and researcher by training, but her main and most important job is caregiving to her mother with early onset Alzheimer's disease. She's turned her constant searching for research and caregiving tips into a blog, which all you NPR fans are going to love this, allsthingsconsidered.com. So clever. Did you come up with that yourself?
I did. I love NPR, so it just kind of made sense. It was like, oh, it just dawned on me. This is perfect.
I love it. Do they know about your blog yet? I feel like we should reach out to them. That's like a good story that I could see them producing.
Yeah, I would enjoy that very much. I'll have to keep working on that, but not yet. Not as of yet. So.
All right. Well, we got some awesome questions from the people in the Senior Rehab Project Facebook group that we'll let kind of guide our conversation, but I just want to get the quick and dirty of your career up to this point. So just kind of tell us kind of the path that you've been on up to this morning.
Sure. So I actually took a little bit of a non-traditional route to PT. I majored in communications in undergrad. I was thinking about teaching or journalism or something like that. And then I kind of worked for a couple of years and decided, all right, I need to go to grad school, kind of nothing's really happening here. I had a couple odd jobs and things like that, but, and I'd always sworn off healthcare. It was so interesting because my mom, who we're going to be talking about, was a nurse. Mm-hmm. She was a nurse for a long time. And so, she kind of always was pushing the healthcare, that kind of thing. And I always just kind of was like, that's not for me. And then, a couple years after undergrad, I kind of was like, wait, I think that is for me, but I don't know if it's, the nursing or the physician is for me. So I kind of got looking into PT, and it really seemed like a perfect blend of, the medical aspects and the relational aspect of being with someone for a long time. And so I started to take the prereq classes, went to Cal State Long Beach, go Beach, and graduated last May. And, I thought I would do the traditional kind of, or more common, sports orthopedic outpatient, but
boring.
I know, right? Okay. That was like my two longer internships were doing that, and they were a good experience. But at the end of that, I was kind of like, I don't think this is for me. I wasn't too keen on it. So a position happened to come up at the VA Long Beach, where I work now, and it was for a research position. And I had never really seen a position like that for PT. Only if you were going to go on and do a PhD did I think that you could really, really immerse yourself in research. And so it was a really fun opportunity for some exoskeleton training. So I work with robotic exoskeletons with spinal cord injury participants. Yeah, so it's pretty good. There's like 10 VAs doing it. It's a big study. So I've really gotten to know research from a PT standpoint, which has been really exciting. So yeah, it's been about a year and a half, and really enjoying it.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
I've been intrigued with probably what you're working with. I just went on a flight last week and purchased Outside Magazine, and they did a big write-up on, I forget the guy's name. I'm drawing a blank, but he basically has created all these amazing kind of exoskeletons, prosthesis, awesome. Or prosthetics that are kind of, pushing the brink. So you're probably well aware of that world. So you kind of shifted your focus. You took that research position. So what have been some of the biggest surprises, year and a half into this job? Things that kind of took you by surprise that you really, really took to or enjoyed?
Well, to be honest, we do research in school as well. I'm sure most
Mm-hmm.
people do some form of research, and I enjoyed it, but I never saw myself doing it full time. And so I kind of went out on a limb when I applied for this job, and I went into this job knowing that it was going to be about a 2-year position. It was, that's research has funding and it has usually an expiration date, and so I kind of was like, well, if it's not for me, it's not like this huge investment, so I can spend a year or two doing it and just kind of go from there. And I ended up really enjoying the finer points of research, and I might even consider, pursuing something more along the research side and less clinical, which I always thought in school I would just be doing clinical PT, but I'm realizing there's so many other options out there. I have to work at it for sure, but that I actually really enjoyed that kind of the very analytical and the nitty gritty stuff of research. So that was surprising to me.
So for just kind of the people that are out in the field in the clinic, what do you feel like we get wrong about those that are doing more research? Like what, I guess, gaps are there in how we perceive, kind of the research world of our profession?
So I think the tendency is to separate them a lot. And I'm in a unique position because I am doing clinical research. I'm doing the hands-on, and I'm also doing, a lot of the stuff on the back end, data, not analyzing, but, collecting data and those types of things. So it's easier for me to blend them, but I can see, more research that's being done more in an academic environment. I think a lot of the sentiment that comes from a lot of PTs is, that's research and this is clinical, and, sometimes maybe they're too far removed from the clinic and you can't always apply the research. And I do agree with that in some instances, but I do think we need to be better about trying to find more ways to blend the two a little closer together and to find ways to adapt the research. Or, maybe clinicians can be more proactive about getting in touch with researchers and really, collaborating with them. I collaborate with a PhD researcher at the VA. She's developing some studies, and it's really fun to be able to give her the PT side of things, and she has a different viewpoint. And I think if that were happening all over, a lot more really good stuff might be coming out of physical therapies.
Yeah, I can't remember which interview it was. I'm thinking maybe Jason Falvey, but at one of the interviews I've done, the person was mainly, in academia doing research. And they talked about, like they need us, they need the clinicians, they need the people that are out in the field to really, help frame the questions that they're going to try and pursue and answer. And that's something that had me thinking, just with our unique perspective, that we have our own role, even though we're, seeing patients out in the field, out in the clinic, and we're not doing, research per se. But we do have a very active role in the creation of that body of literature. And I think Twitter is a great way that's kind of fostered that in terms of, just some of these people that are doing a lot of the research are pretty active on Twitter. And if I do have a question, I can ask them. And if they have the funding, the time, the interest, and they can pursue, a question. So it's definitely helped me reframe my perspective, because I kind of grew up with, a lot of the older PTs that I've known throughout my life. I've heard a lot of them say those who can't do teach. Or those who can't do research, and it just kind of had this, like, there's this, I don't know, it was like this big wall between those out in the field and those in the lab or in the classroom. And the more I do this stuff, the more I just think that's nonsense. So, okay, well, let's get back into all's things considered. So let's tell me about your lovely mother.
I'd love to. So my mom she's 61 years old this year, and she wasn't diagnosed when she was 55, but something happened when she was 55 that made us all kind of go, so she, like I said, she was a nurse for almost 30 years. And around 2011, I got a call from my dad. And he said that something happened at work with your mom, and, she's going to be taking a little bit of time off. And I said, okay, what happened? Yeah. So he said, well, she was trying to do an IV into a patient and she like forgot how to do it. And it really rattled her. It scared her. And so she ended up going home and we learned that, or I learned, I guess my dad had a little more insight, but I learned that had been part of a larger pattern of stuff that was happening over the past year. And like she had just been getting some less than stellar reviews at work. And she had thought that people were kind of, going against her a little bit. And just, she had no idea that what was happening was what ended up being Alzheimer's. But at her young age, none of us really, it wasn't on our radar. But her dad had Alzheimer's, but not at such a young age. So it wasn't on her brain as much. He was in his 70s. And I remember it always being one of her worst fears that she would get that, but I don't think she thought that it would happen at such a young age.
Yeah.
So she ended up taking the time off work. She ended up never going back. That was her last day. And for the next 2 years, my parents kind of bounced around trying to find answers. Different neurologists. They thought, my mom had kind of an epilepsy. It wasn't this crazy, she didn't have these grand mal seizures or anything, but from a young age, she like hit her head. And so she had some seizures. And so they wanted to chalk everything up to that. And so they were trying different medications. There were EEGs and things like that. They were really trying to, they were trying to help us and find the problem. They thought it was maybe lack of sleep. They were just bouncing all these things around. And throughout that 2 years, it just kept getting worse. And we were convinced that it could not be these things because of just how much she was forgetting and how just her attitude and her kind of day-to-day demeanor. So finally in 2013, my dad, they went to another neurologist and she did some tests. I guess she had my mom sitting in front of her facing her and my dad behind my mom facing the doctor as well. And she would ask my mom questions and then look at my dad to see if that was the right answer. And she did this for a while. And, my dad was just shaking his head like, no, that's not the right answer. She's just kind of making up stories. And so at the end of that neurologist said, I'm 100% sure that you have Alzheimer's. And my dad's like, hang on a minute. I've heard can't be 100% sure, unless you're cutting open her brain. And the doctor said, well, I'm as sure as, I can be that I'm very confident this is what it is. Wow. And so, yeah, that was a big dagger for both of them. And then they went to another doctor and they kind of were like, hey, this other doctor said this. And then that neurologist ended up, he didn't deny it. He's like, okay, yeah, I mean, there's a chance for sure. So that was kind of that. And I'll never forget the day that she was diagnosed because that was a really rough day for us. I was in PT school at the time and I think I had a midterm, of course, the next day or something. It was just a total mess. But yeah, I mean, as hard as it is to get the diagnosis, it feels like a starting point that you can actually start to, there's no treatment, there's no cure. But there are clinical trials. We ended up enrolling her in a clinical trial. And so it felt like just a starting point to just do something,
Yeah. And I think Jamie Lowy asked a couple of questions that I think you hit on real well. He said, what were some of the early indications that your mom was having issues with her cognitive skills and memory? And you definitely answered that one. And how did your mom and the rest of your family handle the news of the diagnosis? So would you say it was more of, in terms of handling the news, it was still a matter of, all right, let's keep trucking. Let's, try these different things, see if they will work. Or was it a moment of defeat in a way? Like how would you answer that?
So it was definitely different for like my dad and myself and my brother and my mom. She was devastated obviously that day. So was my dad. We all were. The next day, my dad and her chatting and it's like yesterday never happened. And so we're all in this mindset of, we hadn't taken any classes or anything like that. We didn't know how to communicate. This just happened. So he's going, well, I I need to tell her, she completely forgot that she has Alzheimer's. Like she needs to know, so he reminded her, hey, honey, yesterday I went to the doctor. They told you have Alzheimer's. No, I don't. It's just, and it was like, whoa. So she had completely blocked out this dramatic experience, and, and then she's like upset all over again. And so we didn't make that mistake again.
Yeah.
But so the rest of us are trying to figure out, okay, now we have to walk on eggshells around her and be really careful, but at the same time trying to be proactive about doing something. But that phase didn't last very long, where she was very like suspicious. If we were talking in low tones, she would be like, what are you guys talking about? But that phase didn't last very long until she kind of went into her own world a little bit more. And so we were a little bit more free to talk, not that we're trying to talk about her behind her back all the time, but just coming up with a plan and trying to figure things out. And then she did, I can't remember exactly when she went into the clinical trial, but it was a couple years long, somewhere around 2014. And we know it's what she would have wanted, having been a nurse, and she cared about research. And so, at the time she went into the trial, like my dad was kind of her power of attorney, her voice, so he's the one that entered her in, but we know it's what she would have wanted. And there's nothing else that we could have really done for her treatment wise. So we did that for a couple of years and nothing came of it. It was an Eli Lilly trial that failed. But I don't regret it. I think research, whether you succeed, quote unquote, or fail, it's always, you learn something. So if we played a small role in learning that medication was terrible, then, it's better than sitting home and doing nothing. So
yeah, that's true. So Megan Schlitt, she asked, what type of attitude struck you as the most helpful from your PTs or other health professionals? So I like you to, just reflect on, just kind of the whole medical system that you all, traveled through and had lots of, visits and just experiences, I'm sure.
Yeah.
From your perspective, especially because you had this unique, you're at this time of your life in PT school, you're going to be a clinician. And I know you're just kind of observing, like, what do I want to do in this situation, or what would I not want to do as a healthcare provider? But just, can you give us kind of the most helpful attitudes, or I guess habits that they had, and then the most unhelpful attitudes or habits that they had that you all experienced?
Sure. And, this is obviously, I can only speak for myself and my family, because everyone is different, but so early on, so I just say overall, kindness goes a long way. And it's, you're like, well, duh, but no, like not everyone has the greatest bedside manner or treats her, talks to her and us. Like, and it really depends on the stage that they're in. So in the beginning, when she was more coherent, I'd appreciate it when physicians she dealt mostly with like neurologists and physicians, and nurses, I appreciated when they were gentle in their language with her, careful to not just careful, and not patronizing at the same time. It's a hard, it's a skill that you definitely learn. It's not, especially if you haven't cared for someone with it. I could see that being really tough. I don't know what I would have done, in their shoes. So I try not to be too judgmental. But in professions that deal a lot with dementia, I kind of expect a little bit higher level of care and communication. And so I appreciate it if they took if they took advantage of the time where she was like out of earshot and didn't make it obvious that they wanted to talk to us separately because she was in that, kind of suspicious stage. So just picking up on her cues, and, using that time when she was away to kind of ask us like, okay, how are you doing? How's she doing? A little bit removed from her. When she became more aware, the gentleness again was even more important because she didn't always know what was going on or why she was at an appointment or, who this person was, what they were doing. But, if they're gentle and just really kind with her. She's receiving home care now, and a nurse came in, and so this will go into what I don't like. But so a nurse came in for the first time, a nurse that had never seen her, and just started talking to her really loudly. And I understand, working with older people, like I know too, like sometimes you just have to talk loud. But for her, like the talking loud really just like kind of rubs her the wrong way, and she'll like totally shush you. Even if I laugh too loud, sometimes she'll just shh. Okay. But just she could have, instead of defaulting to her, this is how I talk to old people or old people with dementia or whatever, she could have just been like, hey, how does your mom communicate? Like, what's the best way to, and I would have been like, great. So just sit right up next to her, maybe hold her hand if you're comfortable doing that. Try and catch her eye, try and catch her glance, and then just talk to her really sweetly, really kindly, and smile as much as you can. And she'll be yours, So it just, when she did that, I was like, whoa, like this is not going to work out. But I think she kind of caught on to our very uncomfortable cues of like, trying to comfort her and stuff. So she meant well. Again, I'm trying not to judge too much, but that was just something that, just again, kindness and picking up on the cues just go so far. Another situation that bummed me out even more than that was, I wasn't there, but my dad had taken my mom to an appointment, and it was probably a day when he was really stressed out. We all have those. And but he came back from the appointment and he was kind of down, and I was like, oh, what happened? Are you okay? And he said, well, the doctor suggested that maybe it's time to think about placing mom somewhere, like putting her somewhere. And we had decided as a family, and this is a completely personal decision every family has to make, is if they're going to stay at home with you, if you're going to think about assisted living or memory care or things like that. It's such a personal decision. And, we had decided as a family that we were going to do everything we could to keep her at home. And it's great because, we're fortunate. We have the resources. We have enough people to kind of share the load. I totally understand, where other people might not be able to do that. And I completely respect that decision. But for us, we decided that's what we're doing. And for this doctor to kind of weigh in unsolicited advice, it just was like, she hadn't earned the right, in my opinion, to breach that conversation. And it really threw my dad for a loop, and it threw me too. And it's just, and it's the first doctor that had done that, but it's not the first person to do that. I know we're talking about healthcare professionals, but I mean, just being aware that that's such a sensitive topic, and just treading very carefully in that area, I think is to do.
That just makes me think of, because most of the time I've had situations where we made that recommendation. And it was so hard to do, but it was kind of on the opposite of the spectrum of, it was literally dangerous for them to be at home due to the lack of support. And man, that was, that we do have to tread very lightly.
Totally.
Respect the people, respect the caregivers that are involved, but then, balance that with a bit of truth, if in a very gentle way.
And I totally agree with that. In cases of abuse or neglect or just, things like that, like, yes, definitely step in. Like I would, our case is a little different, obviously, but when you're dealing with that day to day, like it's always going to be a hard call, but you definitely want to err on the side of be a little insensitive if you think it's a safety issue, for sure. Absolutely.
I'm being selfish. I'm just thinking of situations that I've been in. So I've had several patients where I go in and let's say like a spouse, has Alzheimer's, and, I want to talk to the person, the patient, if you will, the person I'm there to work with. Like, I don't want to assume anything. So I look at them, I talk to them, even though I know, they may not be able to give me an accurate answer. And most of the time the caregiver is like, cool, all right, this person's actually, treating my wife or husband like a person. And that works out great. But then there's some caregivers that just, they get frustrated. Like they like, this is an absolute waste of time for you to try and talk to her. Like, just talk to me. And in that moment it's a struggle to like honor that person that's sitting in front of me. But then also, I want to be on the good side of the caregiver, because they're going to be, one of my best assets in delivering care. So like that whole situation I've found to be really
Totally.
challenging. Yeah. If you have any, words of wisdom or advice, it'd be greatly appreciated. But yeah, I've really struggled with that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can be too helpful, because honestly, I've been on both sides. I've felt both sides of that as her caregiver. Like I've seen the nurse come in and talk to her, and I'm like, that's so great that they're, trying to make the effort. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, nothing productive, quote unquote, is going to come from that. But I feel better knowing that it's showing that they care about her as a person, and they still see her as a human capable of, maybe on some level of communicating. But yeah. And then I also think, well, they should just be asking us, the questions they really need to know the answers to. So I would say, talk to the caregiver beforehand, maybe, and say, like, hey, this is what I usually do. I usually go and ask them some questions. Are you comfortable with that? Or are you okay with that? And maybe find a balance between not doing a full on, subjective, a million questions with the person, but maybe a few select questions, and then just talking them through what you're doing. I always appreciate when people talk through what they're doing to my mom, even though she doesn't understand. If they say, okay, I'm going to take your blood pressure now, maybe on some level she knows, okay, they're talking to me. At least they're engaging with her.
Yeah. And
that's really nice. And I wouldn't want them to not do that. I always want them to do that. But the questions, it's tricky. And I think it's totally dependent on the person. Unfortunately, there's no right answer.
Yeah, there isn't.
Right. Because I struggle with both sides of it too. So.
Yeah, that's where I think what you said before, just picking up on the cues, just the nonverbal cues. I feel like that's some really good information to help inform us. So she was diagnosed, you tried the different trials, things were progressing, the disease was progressing, she's in the home, you made that decision. So practically, what did you all change in terms of the setup of the home or routines? What practical changes did you all make to care for her well?
Yeah. So the first, probably most important thing we did was we took some classes, and that just set the groundwork. And
do you recommend any classes?
Well, so it's the ones I took are local to where I live. I live out in Orange County, California, and there's a place called Alzheimer's Orange County, but Alzheimer's associations everywhere have these classes, and that's a nationwide organization. And they had just some, I don't know, I think it was called Savvy Caregiver or something like that. And they just teach you how to communicate with someone and so we were, in the beginning, like I mentioned, we were just reminding her about things, and we'd correct her. We just want, in our mind, we're we want to preserve as much of her cognitive function as possible. We want her to be as aware as possible. And then we go to those classes and it's don't do that, because it just upsets everyone and it's just a bad idea. So once we started to make that mind shift of, just improv, basically you're an improv troupe now, and you just, you go along with everything that you can, just agree, try not to say no, but, instead redirect the conversation, just reassure. And it's really tough in certain situations. My mom wanted to drive, and luckily we had used her epilepsy excuse as the reason to take away basically her license. And, but that's one of the toughest issues, I think, for people is taking over the keys. And so for us, we kind of got around it. We didn't have to be you have Alzheimer's, you can't drive.
Yeah.
But I think helpful things that I've heard are, instead of saying you can't drive, just being well, your car's being fixed, or it's in the shop, or, let's try tomorrow. And it sounds so heartless and but that's, you kind of have to figure out what you need to do to, and without upsetting the person too much. If they're going to remember the next day and bug you about it, then don't use that one. But, find another story that aligns, keeping them safe and also not upsetting them too much. And so it's just, it's this journey we've been on now for years and years of just learning what works for us and And so that's, the most important thing was definitely learning how to communicate with her and how not to go crazy for us.
Yeah.
And then,
gosh.
Yeah. But so everyone goes through the stages a little bit differently, like physically and cognitively. And my mom maintained her physical function pretty much up until now. So she just lost all the cognitive function really quickly at first, but she was still walking around. She was still really active. She's always been active her whole life though. So we've only recently started to make a lot of the changes in our home with the physical stuff, grab bars, just making sure there's no obstacles, because she does still walk around, but sometimes she'll need help and sometimes she'll just be able to do it by herself. We put in like a knob on the back of our oven to turn off the gas, because we noticed that she just started playing with the knobs on the oven, and we got really freaked out about that. We don't want to burn in the middle of the night. She had twisted the knob on like the fireplace too, because we'd always just left the key in to the gas. And so I came down one morning and I was like, it smells like gas in here. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So, we took that key out and just remove it. It's helpful to try and stay ahead of those types of things, but you can't always. Sometimes things happen and you didn't think about, correcting that early on.
Right.
So we installed like bidets in our toilets just to make it easier to clean her. She's incontinent now. And so that was a whole challenge. That was really tough to adapt to, but definitely physical therapy training helped a little bit on me with that one. And, it's just doing it over and over again. And then you adapt. It's like anything else. The next big thing happens and you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with this? And then just do it, and it never gets easier, but you just kind of adapt to it. So,
yeah. I'm going to give a few anecdotes. One patient I had, the spouse, she's absolutely amazing. She's actually, she's been on the podcast, Peony Smith. She did the intro for the longest time until my grandmother took over. But she was a big fan of the 36-Hour Day book.
Yeah, I read that.
She said that was super helpful. And then in terms of the different modifications and whatnot, I had one family and they had more disposable income than most of my patients for sure. But they really got they kind of geeked out on all the tech stuff, like the cameras that sync with your phones and like pressure sensors and socks if they get up in the middle of the night and like all this, which I mean, I don't know, they liked it, but I could see how that could probably get annoying when you get a notification every hour through the night that's someone's up. But yeah, there is that kind of whole tech world that's really trying to make the home a safer place, but then rest kind of the worries of the caregiver as well.
Yeah.
Have y'all messed around with that stuff much?
We installed cameras, we have a camera where she sleeps, because she generally sleeps pretty late. So we like to know right when she wakes up and we can kind of go there. And she did have a period of time where she was getting up in the middle of the night a lot and wandering around. And we usually heard her like open her door, but the camera was helpful with the notifications for that too, because we didn't want her, stumbling around in the middle of the night.
Right.
One time she just like put clothes on and was just going about her day at night. And so, we don't want her to be just too confused. As long as she's happy though, I'm happy to just kind of let her do her thing, but we wanted to be around her when she's up and about. So yeah, the cameras have been huge for sure. Trying to think of what else we have used over the years. No pressure sensing socks.
What was cool is the story behind that one is it was this gentleman's grandson. I mean, he was a kid, like 13, 14 years old.
Wow.
That invented them. Sorry, I think you're saying something, but it was crazy that someone so young invented those.
That's awesome. We've definitely put our house on lockdown.
Yeah.
So because she was and is prone to wander, if the door was open, she would just leave. And I don't know how far she would get, how fast, but I hate even thinking about that. So she did get out once. She got out twice. Sounds weird. She got out, but I mean, reality, she did get out, and it was years ago, and she was still in really good shape. So she went really far, and I just remember, we live in a great neighborhood. Like, I'm not worried. I wasn't too worried, it was one of like the scariest 20 minutes of my life looking for her. I went for a run to just kind of look for her. My dad was in the car. We just scoured the neighborhood. We finally found her, and I was so relieved. And, so we kind of put those baby doorknobs on our door that you just you have to squeeze. And so she can't really figure those out. And she'll just go up to them and just turn them. She'll just stand there and turn them for like minutes. And she doesn't seem upset or anything. So we've kind of stuck with that. That was good. And then we put an extra lock on our door, but made sure that we could still get out if there's like a fire or something.
Yeah.
But it's just an extra layer that makes me feel a lot better in case the door doesn't quite shut, and she could just kind of pull it open. There's that chain there.
Yeah.
So that helps us definitely sleep better at night and during the day, even because she needs 24/7 care. But the reality is you can't just be watching her constantly. You have to go to the bathroom or like do something. And so it only takes a second, we learned, for her to just get outside if she wanted to. So the locks have been helpful.
Awesome. Lots of stuff we can do.
Yeah.
So, and I know you write about that on your amazing blog. All right, the last listener question, and this is an issue that I've come across a few times. I've got a funny story. Let me read this question first. Jeff Jennings says, I've heard some therapists say that they fear helping patients with Alzheimer's become too mobile because they get up and hurt themselves or wander away from home. Do you have any thoughts or insights into finding a balance between increased functional mobility and reducing fall risk versus empowering them too much so they get up and hurt themselves since they have poor safety awareness? So to give the anecdote or practical example of that, oh, this is funny. So I had a patient, amazing guy, super fit, World War II vet. He was an engineer, exercised, 3 to 4 days a week. But he was living with his daughter and his, daughter's spouse. So I was, coming about 3 times a week it was probably the third month or so. And we were up to a point where we were, I had kettlebells. We were doing, resisted squats and farmer carries and deadlifts and all this stuff. And we were doing get-ups from the ground in all kinds of different ways. And I would just go around the house and just pick a random spot, for him to get on the ground and get up. So he'd get used to kind of using different chairs and tables, countertops, toilets, whatever. Just trying to think like worst case scenario, if you fell, you'd be able to get back up. And so we would do a lot of, like just how to scale objects. So one day he always walked around the pool in the backyard. So he would just, open the sliding door and just do like 5 laps around the pool and then come back in and watch TV. And it was kind of like his morning routine. Well, the kitchen faced the backyard, like the pool, and the daughter does dishes in the morning, just like, is watching. And he does a couple laps and he like looks to the left and sees the fence that's been there forever. And he's like, I'm imagining this is what he says in his head. Like, I could scale that. I could climb that. And he goes over and, puts both hands on the top and starts to pull himself up, puts one leg, against the fence, is literally climbing the fence. And the daughter runs out. I was like, stop, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then the next day she's like, okay, like I love, you're trying to do all this stuff with my dad, but like this has to stop. I'm sorry. Wow. So yeah, there's my anecdote. But what would you say to Jeff? Do you have any thoughts or insights into finding a balance between increased functional mobility and reducing fall risk versus empowering them too much so they get up and hurt themselves since they have poor safety awareness?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a story. And I cannot relate with my mom. Like, she would never obviously scale a fence. So not obviously, but I'm going to tell you, she could never scale a fence like that. So it's a tough question. And I hadn't really heard it before that Jeff had posed that question. But it's so easy to judge other people when you're kind of outside of the dementia world. But when you're in the thick of it and you see how other people's situations make it really tough, you start to have a lot of empathy for them. And I totally empathize with that daughter not wanting her, father to escape. But I've seen my mom on both sides of this kind of spectrum. Early on, like I said, she was really prone to wandering. We had to be super vigilant. She got out a couple times, really scary. And so we decided to basically alter her environment. We locked the house down. We made sure that when we made sure she had safe places to wander inside. Even in the backyard, she's safe because she can't scale the fence, and the fence is locked and everything. So I feel totally comfortable with her being outside. And then a couple months ago, she had a kind of a spell where she had a UTI and she had to take some antibiotics, and she was really down. Like I'd never seen her. It was the first time I'd seen her sleeping all day long, needing help to walk. And it was really, really upsetting for all of us because, at least every time we're like, at least she can walk, at least she can, still kind of eat. And then to see her go from such a dramatic decline, I would have given anything for her to be able to walk again, and luckily she kind of came out of that. She's not back to where she was before that incident happened, but she's a little bit better and she's walking around more and stuff. But like when I saw her unable to walk, it was like, oh my gosh, and I hadn't really considered what that would really be like until I saw it in front of me. And so having experienced both of those extremes, and obviously only being able to speak for myself, I could still never in good conscience advocate that withholding therapy or exercise, in order to limit someone's ability is like the right choice. And that's probably, I'm speaking of a position of, we're fortunate to have enough people to watch her and, enough means to adapt and accommodate our house to her and being able to provide a safe place. And so it's hard for me to speak to other people that don't have that. But I just feel like try to exhaust your other options first in terms of adapting your environment and things like that, because they're going to decline. I mean, it's only a matter of time. We can't stop the decline, but just I've seen how even a short walk or some exercise just does wonders for her. And, besides that, she's kind of sitting or lying down all day. And so I just imagine, the bed sores, the pain that can come from that, just exercise is like this wonder drug for her. And so to withhold that, I could never do that for her. But I mean, that situation is tough that you were in. I don't know if it's just a matter of when he goes and does his outside laps around the pool, she just takes that time with him. It doesn't sound like he's out there for too long, and then maybe she finds a way to like lock the door and keep him inside. But I think the strength stuff you did with him sounds awesome. And like, it would be hard to just be like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. Cause I'm assuming it brought him a lot of joy too, to do that stuff. And so
sometimes
okay.
he complained a good bit.
You're done.
Yeah, no, we would do like planks and push-ups too, and he'd be like, I haven't done these since his training camp days. Like he told me that. Yeah. Like, sorry, buddy. I wonder, so would that ultimately be like a power of attorney call
on like DCing for
yeah, like to say, we're going to stop, like we don't want, even though they would functionally benefit from PT, we don't want to do it.
I mean, every situation is probably a little bit different, right? If it's like something that seems very medically necessary, then maybe you could make a case for it. But I don't know. That'd be a really tough call.
I've experienced it too. And, we'll contract out with local like assisted living facilities and whatnot that have memory care units.
Yeah.
And, we'll go in there and sometimes some of the nurses' aides like, oh, PT.
Oh no.
Like in some, like with some patients, like people that are just always wondering that, like the aides can get frustrated with us for, giving a patient the capacity to get out and wonder, because they're likely, or that the chance of them falling and hurting themselves is dramatically increased as opposed to sitting and,
Yeah, but think about the risks of sitting.
Exactly. Yeah.
The risks of sitting to me outweigh falling is no joke, but I feel like maybe that needs to be, and maybe this is just idealistic thinking, but maybe they just need to have a couple more staff on hand too. Yeah. And I know how expensive those places are and how I haven't looked at their budget and how much they, can allot to that kind of thing. But I don't know. I feel like there just has to be another solution besides it. It just seems cruel to me, honestly, to like withhold someone from achieving as much function as they can. Like, think of yourself in that situation, It's like, what I want to just be sitting in a chair all day. If I could be walking around, like, hell no, so it's
right. Yeah. And it definitely does, typically, I mean, just from what I've experienced, it does seem like an issue of not enough manpower or time, to supervise. So yeah, I know there's probably lots of people listening right now that have gone through similar situations or, have been through those situations, but come up with really cool solutions or whatnot. If that is you listening, go to the Facebook group and, we'll get a good conversation going. Cause I know, I feel like this is something we don't talk a lot about, but it's very common, just at least in home health and, I'd say most SNFs and whatnot, but so, all right, well, I want to be respectful of your time. Let's just wrap up with a couple quick questions. All right. So how old were you when you finished PT school? Or started PT school. How about that?
I was 26 and I was 29 when I finished PT school.
Okay. So what would you tell your 26-year-old self?
As it relates to PT school?
As it relates to your career and just kind of the current role that you find yourself in, professionally, but then also personally with caring for your mom.
Yeah. I would probably, professionally, I would say I would advise myself to branch out a little bit more in the clinicals that I chose, and just even something like home health, I think would have been cool, knowing what I know now. Obviously hindsight, but I definitely thought that I was on a one track to a certain area, which I didn't end up going into. And so that's something that I would have probably done a little bit differently. As it relates to my mom, gosh, that's so tough because I do feel a lot older than how much time has passed since I was 26. Caring for someone in this way really ages you in a way. And maybe that's kind of a weird way of saying it, but just, I feel like I've experienced just the highs and lows of like like human life that and I don't even have kids yet. So that's a whole nother thing that I know will like blow my mind, but just seeing someone so vulnerable at an older age has, anytime I run into like an older looking person or someone that's confused on the street, I feel like it's my duty to like make sure that they're okay because, I would want someone to do that for my mom. And so, but I don't know what advice I would give to myself. I would just say, be aware of what's going on around you. Cause maybe I did encounter some of those situations when I was younger, just starting out, and I could have done something, even something just little, just a kind word or, like a knowing glance to someone taking care of someone else. It goes a long way. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it would be hard to prepare for that. Like what advice it's probably a terrible question. It's like, it's almost, all right, buckle up, you're in for a ride.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I think one thing, granted, I'm not kind of in the thick of it on the day-to-day side of things, but like, just involved in lots of these types of situations. And it definitely does change you, especially how you perceive the world and perceive, I guess, our fragility. We're obsessed with youth and health, and just to see, the body's a very amazing, complex thing, and we're not as robust as we may perceive. Like, I don't want to think like we're weaklings or anything, but we're mortal beings, and it's easy to forget that in our culture sometimes, especially with we don't talk about death, we don't talk about aging a lot, but it really does. Yeah, it just really changes your perspective, and I think for a good way, a more realistic, healthy way.
Yes. On that note, like I ended up moving back in with my parents around, right before PT school to save money for school, and also just because of what was going on with her. And I feel like it's such a rare thing. I mean, maybe not moving back in with your parents in general now for for my generation, but to do that, it felt really weird. And I felt like I had to like hide it for a while, that I was like moving back in because I didn't want to go into the whole story of like, well, I'm taking care of my mom. And then it's this sob story of like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
But like, yeah, our culture doesn't really, it's not common for like multiple generations, to like live under one roof and like take care of each other. But it's been an amazing experience. And I feel like on the one hand, maybe I missed out on some things that I might've been doing otherwise, but I wouldn't trade being able, the honor of being able to take care of her for that. But it has been a weird thing to live in like this American culture and in a way that I'm, situation that I'm in. So,
yeah.
But yeah, we don't talk about it. You're right.
I've got a interview. I'm looking for it now next week. I'm going to look this up. This woman has written a book that I think you'll find very interesting. She lives in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
And she lives in a multi-generational home, but she has written a book about it. Let's see. The Future is Here, Senior Living Reimagined.
Oh, wow.
Is the book. And she just released another one. But yeah, so I'll be talking with her next week. But I think it's something that you would really enjoy. I mean, I think she has a grandmother, mother, her children, just like crazy setup, and just kind of blogging and writing about it along the way. So
that's awesome. Great.
So yeah, her Lisa Cini at CINI. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but that's her name. So, all right. Well, you got to get going, but I want to just thank you. This is not, obviously not an easy subject, but just the way you're able to share your story in a very, I guess, unselfish way. I mean, it's just super helpful, and you're being super vulnerable. I hope the listeners, realize that or understand it. Like, this is not easy to talk about. Just put yourself in Melissa's shoes, but such a valuable thing for people like me that are in homes or in situations where we, often feel like we have no freaking clue what we're doing and we're walking on eggshells. But just to hear things from your perspective is awesome. So if the listeners, if you all enjoyed this conversation, I highly encourage you to check out Melissa's website, All's Things Considered. That's ALZthingsconsidered.com. A link will be in the show notes, and you can reach out to her if you have any questions. But I'd also just, ask a question in the Senior Rehab Project Facebook group. Melissa's in there, and several other awesome clinicians are in there as well. That we could get a cool dialogue going about this very complex topic. So Melissa, once again, I appreciate your time and just sharing, your story. And tell your mom I said, hey.
I will tell her that Dustin says, hey, Mom.
And stay funky.
It's my pleasure to talk. Thanks, Dustin.
Awesome. Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you enjoy this content, I highly encourage you to go to seniorrehabproject.com, where you can find more helpful episodes, lots of free resources, and to see how you can become a game changer and influence the direction of this movement. I appreciate you, and I'll talk with you soon. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky.